We were approaching that airplane from the port side, the southeasterly direction, basically the same direction that the attacking aircraft were coming in from. But the ladder to get into that airplane was hanging from the starboard gun blister. I ran around the backside of that airplane, set those canisters down, started up the ladder. I don't think I got more than a couple of rungs, but it dawned on me, hey, if I get inside this airplane, am I going to be strong enough to reach down and pull that big old gun up inside? I'm not so sure of that, so I jumped down off the ladder just as the guy with the gun got there. Give it to me, you get up inside, I'll hand it to you. Boy, he chopped up that ladder, jumped high, turned around, reached down. I got the gun to him somehow, most likely muzzle first, which is the lightest end, but which is also a safety no-no. But I don't think either one of us were thinking much about safety right at that time. I shouted, put it in a port blister. That's the side they're coming from. He turned and disappeared into the fuselage of that airplane. I grabbed the canister of that ammo in my right hand, guided myself with the lever of the left hand, set it inside the airplane, back down the ladder, got the second canister back up, set it inside, jumped inside, picked those two canisters up, stepped across to the port gun blister just as he was swinging that gun out and locking it in fire position. I set the canisters down under the gun, flipped the lid open, up the end of the belt, ready to load, thinking he'd have the breech open. But he was just standing there staring skyward. I looked up and here comes another one of those airplanes that are powered up. Same old blinking flashing lights. Now I'm only hearing popping sound, but somebody told me later when maybe some of those bullets passing through the fuselage of that airplane we were in. Big old bomb hanging there in the bottom. Man, I couldn't wait on this other guy to get his train of thoughts back together. I just reached over, slid the lock forward, threw the breech open, pinned the end of the belt in the loading mechanism, slammed the breech shut. Grabbed the charging pin, pulled it back, and let it go. Bam! We get around in the chamber. Shoot! I shouted, and he pulled the trigger. Now, I guess he was one of those guys that thought with a machine gun, you don't have to aim. You just point a general direction far away. Because I stood there and watched those tracer bullets fly off harmless through empty space, somewhere near to where that airplane had once been. Back there, I was raised on a farm in the prairie pothole of Minnesota in the 20s and in the 30s. You became a hunter and a gatherer real early in life. You also better become a good shot, because being a good shot would oftentimes mean the difference of whether you would or would not have food on the table. I shouted, let me get the next one. He let that gun down, stepped aside. I grabbed it, brought it back up to firing position. Just as I did, here comes another one of those airplanes in a power dive. Same old blinking flashing lights, big old bomb hanging there on the bottom. Man, I got a bead and a lead. A bead in the lead. I continued to lead and squeeze the trigger. I continued leading and firing. All the while that airplane came down, completed its power dive, pulled out into level flight path just overhead. I watched those tracer bullets fly through the air. It looked like every one of them went right to that round opening in the front of that old air-cooled dive bomber, then stitch to stitch right down the bottom of the fuselage. Now some of you know and remember that following each one of those tracer bullets, there were four regular bullets. Another tracer, 4 more regular bullets. I know here and I know here. I did some damage to that aircraft, but you better not be watching him to see what happened to him. He's going away. He's no longer there. You damn well better be looking for the next one that's coming at you. I bring that gun back down, and I'm looking for another one in the power dive. I don't see any power dive. Oh, there's one. There's one out over the channel, maybe 2 city blocks away, well within the range of a 50 caliber machine gun. He's not in the power dive, but a steep banking and descending left turn is always lining up to make another machine gun run on him. Because he's in that banking turn, I can see the cockpit 6 or 8 feet behind the front of that airplane. I figure at that distance and at that speed, if I use the front of that airplane as my aiming point, I'm even going to get some rounds in the fuselage, maybe even into the cockpit. And believe you me, if you can get a few of these bouncing around inside that cockpit with that pilot, you're going to give him something else to think about. He starts coming back and machine gunning your area a second time. I maintained that lead, squeeze the trigger. I don't think I got off more than 6 or 8, maybe a dozen rounds at the most. But I saw at least 2 of those tracer bullets seem to disappear into the fuselage of that airplane just forward of the cockpit. And when they did, that airplane did an abrupt rolling right turn and was gone from my field of fire. No more aircraft came back to bomb or to strafe our end of the island that morning. I stayed at that gun. I got to fire short bursts at other aircraft as they passed through my limited field of fire on the way to or from other targets. But no more head-on turkey shoots like those first ones were. A little later on, about halfway through that raid, about the same time that the second wave of those attacking aircraft came in, the USS Nevada came down the channel, making a run for open water. Boy, oh boy, those pilots. those airplanes got on it like a swarm of bees. They were hoping they could sink it there in the channel, and that would have blocked the harbor for some time. I got the fire short burst of some of those aircraft, as they do pass through my limited field of fire, but no more head-on turkey shoots like those first ones were. 50 years later, I was listening to a news broadcast from Pearl Harbor. It seems that year that they had made a great effort to locate as many of those pilots as they possibly could who had participated in that raid at Pearl Harbor, who had survived the war, who were physically able to travel. Thank you much. Keep it handy. Who were physically able to travel. They had brought them back to Pearl Harbor for that anniversary. They were interviewing them, and they asked this one part, what part did you play in that raid? Now listen carefully to this. He said, I was the lead pilot of a group of 9 aircraft. Our assigned targets were the airplanes and the hangars on Ford Island. That's where I was. He said, when I went in for my first run, machine gun dropped my bomb. I didn't see a soul. It was like the whole island was asleep. But he said, we were surprised how fast they reacted, because by the time I had came around and was lining up for a second machine gun run, there was so much fire coming up that I turned and went elsewhere. Oh, I would love to talk to him. There's the guy that dropped the very first bomb to fall at Pearl Harbor itself that morning. That's the guy that dropped the bomb that got to me physically, spilled of my blood, most likely the very first blood to fall at Pearl Harbor that morning. But in spite of that, I think I'm the guy that got him mentally with that on-target 50 caliber machine gun fire and changed his mind about coming back and machine gunning us the second time. In 2010, I, my dear sweet wife, daughter, and son-in-law went to Pearl Harbor for that anniversary. There were about 116 of my fellow survivors there. I think each and every one of them had been back to Pearl Harbor a number of times in those passing years. But for me, that was the first time back to Pearl Harbor in 64 years. After attending the memorial service that morning, then the rededication of the Arizona Visitor Center, we made a tour of the area there of all those artifacts that are on display there. Then went inside of the Visitor Center, watched some of those short movies and stuff and other memorabilia that's on display there. Then boarded the very first one of those white boats to go out aboard the USS Arizona Memorial. Standing there on the deck of that memorial, look over the side, the hull of that vessel, resting there on the bottom of the harbor, and all those names listed there on the honor wall. And know that those are the names of 1,177 of my sunken shipmates and fallen comrades. And also to know that the earthly remains of over 900 of them are still aboard the USS Arizona. I read in the Remembrance magazine that just came yesterday that they are preparing this December 7th to bury the last Arizona survivor who wants to be buried aboard the Arizona. There are a few others left, Don Stratton and some of them, they're in their upper 90s, but they have decided to be buried with family in their own plots rather than. So that will be the last burial aboard the Arizona. Anyway, after standing there on that deck that day and thinking back to that long ago Sunday morning when I saw that ship explode and then burn for some time thereafter, then resting there on the bottom of the harbor each time we passed by on the Liberty boat going to or from Honolulu, or on other ships during other tours of duty during and after World War II. Standing there on the deck of that memorial, I wondered if there wasn't something that maybe I as an individual could do to try to bring to them the well-deserved honor and continued remembrance that they so rightfully deserve. And I thought that maybe somehow I could prepare myself so I could do something like that. I had dreamed about it when we got home from that event. I had a vision that someday maybe I could prepare myself in such a way that I could share my experience there with other people so that you would understand, maybe have a better understanding of what some of your family members or relatives may have went through that morning. And because you are willing to let me speak to you here today, to share my experience with you, I am living that dream. You have made that vision come true, and I have kept my promise. The following day, in the accompaniment of a naval historian, we were able to go to some of the highly restricted areas on Ford Island. On the way there, we stopped by the USS Utah Memorial, paid our respects, honor and remembrance to over 40 crew members still aboard that vessel. Then around to the harbor inlet end of the island where the old PBY twin-engine Catalina flying boat patrol squadrons were stationed. I got once again to stand on the very spot where that first bomb to fall at Pearl Harbor itself fell that morning. Standing there on that spot, closed my eyes, it was like almost the whole thing was happening all over again. I could hear the roar of those airplanes. I could see those blinking, flashing lights. I could hear those popping, buzzing, whizzing sounds. I could feel the recoil of that machine gun that I was firing there in the port bliss of that PBY. I could see those ships being bombed, torpedoed, exploding, burning, sinking, capsizing, those bodies floating in the water. Oh, I wanted to get away from there. I asked that naval historian, by the way, his name was Jim Newman, could we go inside of building 54? He said, well, it's highly restricted, but let's go see. So we worked our way through the barricades, went over there. The door was ajar just as it was that long, long ago Sunday morning. There was a small work detail working in there, and Jim was able to convince that chief petty officer in charge of that work detail that they should let us inside the hangar. I really wanted to get up into that office, that personnel office that I was in when that bomb fragments, machine gun bullets, whatever it was, came blasting into the back of my head. But that was all closed off. I couldn't get up there. Somewhere there that morning, I don't know whether it was up there in that personnel office where that stuff blasted into me, whether it was in that ditch we were ordered into and then left even under the threat of military discipline to put up a defense, whether it was there at the ammo shack getting the machine gun ammunition, or whether it was in the port blister, that PBY airplane that I was firing that 50 caliber machine gun from. Somewhere there that morning, I lost that naive 17-year-old sailor boy, and I never ever again found him. Those of you who have been involved in similar events will maybe remember that something like that can steal your youth from you really, really quickly. It can age you prematurely. When we left the hangar, I asked him, could we go around the backside of the hangar? Sure. So as we walked around what would be the easterly end of the hangar, I was able to point out the window pane in the very bottom row of the third group of windows from the left corner of the building. There's a clear glass window pane there, then the older ones were milky colored. This was a clear, that's the one that stuff would have come to get to me. When we got on the backside of the hangar, I'm kicking around out there looking for some signs of that construction ditch that I thought was out there somewhere. I found later that it was over by the other end of the hangar, out near between the taxiway and the runway.